From Wana Brands, welcome to Enhance Your Life. I'm your host, Jonathan Small, and each week I talk to people from all sorts of professions and backgrounds about how cannabis has enhanced their lives and how this healing plant can enrich your life too. Hey everybody, welcome to the Enhance Your Life podcast. My name is John Small and I am your host. And we've got a great guest today. Warren Bobrow is joining us. And Warren is a mixologist, a chef, and a writer. He's known as the Cocktail Whisperer, and he's the author of a new book including Cannabis Cocktails, Mocktails and Tonics, The Art of Spirited Drinks, and Buzzworthy Libations. That sounds, I just want to drink that book. As a freelance mixologist specializing in craft spirits, Warren has developed bar programs and served as a master mixologist for several brands of liquor, including Busted Barrel Rum. And Warren was also the 2010 Ministry of Rum judge and was the only American food journalist asked to participate in Fête de la Gastronomie. Oh my God, my French classes have come in handy here. A nationwide celebration of French cuisine in Burgundy. Warren, welcome to the podcast.
Jonathan, thank you for having me. I was just saying I was off in Martha's Vineyard land.
Oh, and, nice.
My whole calendar completely blew up in front of me. So everything that I've had go on in the past week has been a surprise to me.
Including this podcast. Well, hopefully you just weren't having a cannabis craft, or that probably wouldn't have been such a bad thing to have a cannabis cocktail. But let's talk a little bit about you before we talk about cannabis cocktails, because how did you get into this kind of interesting new world of cannabis mixology? Tell us a little bit about your origin story.
My origin story comes from my grandfather. In later years, he was in the motion picture industry, but his earlier years, he was in the patent pharmaceutical business.
Oh.
He made a product that made him very successful by the name of Geritol. And Geritol was really an invention for something that no one had, an affliction that no one had. That was iron poor blood. So I had this massive influence over me of the early apothecary, if you will. And I've written 6 books, and one of the books I wrote was on whiskey. It was called Whiskey Cocktails. And my next book I did was a book on bitters and shrub syrup cocktails, which are the acidulated beverages of yore, back in the 1700s when they weren't drinking well, but, they had these vinegar fruit syrups that they would add to the lousy liquor to make something that had a semblance of drinkability. And so I was doing a book signing at the Pharmacy Museum, which is down on Royal Street in New Orleans, during Tales of the Cocktail, an event that I would attend every year for like 10 years. And at the same time, coincidentally, they were doing a exhibition at the Pharmacy Museum about cannabis in the early apothecary.
Wow.
And I knew what book I was going to write.
You're like, that's the one. There it is. He's showing it now on the screen. Cannabis Cocktails. Yeah. That's a great book.
Cocktails, Mocktails, and Tonics. So I wrote, my first book was a book called Apothecary Cocktails, and the only ingredient that my publisher wouldn't let me put in the book was cannabis. So Cannabis Cocktails really is the book that I always wanted to write, and it has everything in it, including some strong drinks. So,
you are definitely the guy that you want to invite to a party, right? Like you want Warren to come. Warren is going to make the best drinks.
I even have a copy of Apothecary Cocktails in French.
God,
so
I want to try all these. I love it. So you've always wanted to write this cannabis?
Yeah, I mean, I've smoked weed since I was 12 years old. I mean,
Wow.
It was probably the only thing that allowed me to say that I was going to be a survivor in life, because many of my peers growing up were drinkers. They're not here anymore. And there's a reason for that, because alcohol is poison. And cannabis to me has, I have an affliction with my eyes known as glaucoma, and it's completely under control with medical cannabis. I mean, what more does someone want in life to be able to see? Of course.
Yeah, that's amazing. I've heard so many stories about cannabis and its effect on glaucoma. So many people have come on this podcast and other podcasts that I've done. Why that is not more widely known is a tragedy.
It's the basis of why we have medical cannabis in New Jersey. It's because of glaucoma.
Oh, really?
I mean, this is so important that it lowered my eye pressure to below the normal threshold. And my ophthalmologist, even said to me, my right eye was 48, my left eye was 38. They take your driver's license when it gets to be 50. And that's a lot of pressure. I was chewing down a bottle of Advil every month, 50 tablets. It was just not healthy. I had terrible headaches and from my eye pressure. And it went away completely with medical cannabis. Not bad.
Yeah, not a bad thing at all. So cannabis has been with you most of your adult life, a little bit of your
no,
even your child life.
12. I would say that
12.
Was childhood.
We don't want to encourage this at home for my 12-year-old son listening, my 15-year-old son, my 11-year-old daughter. But I get it. I mean, a lot of people experimented early, but obviously you continued with it.
But look, I just turned 60 last week, so this is a whole different time. This is the 1970s that we're talking, the early 1970s. I mean, going to see Aerosmith and going to see Rick Derringer and going to see Led Zeppelin and going to see the Grateful Dead, that was all part of my my early teenage life. And I don't make any apologies for that, but there was always cannabis around. There was always everything around. I mean, if you wanted to take hard drugs, that was around too. But I wasn't interested in that.
Yep.
I was interested in smoking weed because all my friends did, and it was lousy.
You mentioned the Grateful Dead. You've been to quite a few Dead shows, correct?
Yeah, about 300.
Wow.
Sure.
So you were, I guess, what they call are a deadhead.
No,
not really.
No, I didn't stink. I might have worn patchouli, but I didn't stink. I mean,
all right, I take that back. You weren't a deadhead.
I went to private school, and there were a lot of people who listened to the Grateful Dead when I was growing up, and I went along. I got on the bus.
What has been your favorite place to smoke weed? You've been all over the world.
Yeah.
Are there certain places that might surprise people about where?
Yeah, I would. Because of this on my arm, I don't know if you can see it.
It's a tattoo that said, what is it? Is a key? What is it?
Employees only.
Oh, okay. Employees only.
I was in Moscow teaching at the Moscow Bar Show. I was working for a company named Marussia as their master mixologist and brand ambassador for a boutique rum company, rum company, that made a rum called Maison. And they were individual rums from individual distilleries, and it's high-end stuff. And so I taught a class on unmanipulated rum at the Moscow Bar Show, and I happened to be at one of the many mixology bars in Moscow, and someone saw that I had the employees only tattoo on my arm, and they asked me where I got it. And at the same time, they were calling Steve Schneider, who is in Singapore with his bar employees only in Singapore, saying there's this guy here and he has your tattoo on his arm. Who is he? And he said, he's Warren, he's fine, whatever. And ask him about his cannabis book. And the bartender said, what's this I hear about a book that you wrote about cannabis? And that was the thing. I know I'm in or actually sort of under Red Square in Moscow smoking a joint.
Wow.
There's 5 daily nonstops from Amsterdam to Moscow. So they're getting weed.
Yeah, there is weed in Moscow for anybody who might.
Moscow, but if you're an American, don't ask.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I'm not recommending you smoke weed in Moscow unless somebody offers it to you and you're under and you're. Yeah, just don't do it. So I guess the part of the forbidden nature of it just made it. Was the weed any good in Moscow?
Oh, it was from Amsterdam. It was
okay,
fabulous.
So it was really good. Yeah.
It was really good. Yeah. I mean, when I was in Berlin in October, I met some nice people who had this great Spanish sinsemilla, and that was some of the best weed I've ever smoked. It was from Spain.
For those at home listening who are interested in this whole idea of cannabis cocktails, what do we need to know? Like, is this something that you can do? Obviously, it's something you can do at home. You wrote a book about it. But what does the cannabis mocktail bar look like? Like, what are things? What are some of the staples that you have to have?
Well, the first thing is no stigmas. That you treat cannabis in the same manner that we've been treating alcohol for the past, since the end of Prohibition.
Yep.
So take away the stigmas and use cannabis as an ingredient as pertinent as using bitters or a shrub or craft spirits or what have you. I mean, it's an essential ingredient that has essential flavors and it has essential aromas. I'm developing a beverage right now in California that's going to have live resin THC in it.
Oh, wow. And what is it going to be called?
It's called Klaus, after my 1850s German drinking gnome by the same name. And he's traveled all over the world with me.
To explain to our listeners, you have a gnome in your hand that is from 1860, named Klaus, that seems to have some sort of beer bottle in his hand.
Some sort of liquor bottle.
Sort of liquor bottle. Where did you get this gnome? This is this antique gnome.
There's an interesting backstory. I used to live in an estate near where I live now, and it had incredible roses that I was completely out of control with. And my friend of mine who really understands roses would take care of them, and I would give her samples of whatever it was that liquor companies were sending me. And one day that I was doing something in the garden, probably pricking myself on rose prickers, she gave me Klaus, and she said, we have the whole collection in our family, but he is the one that seems to be the most geared towards who you are, and that's someone who works in liquor. So he's brought me great luck.
I love Klaus. He's adorable.
He led me to become the CEO of the company that makes this cannabis-infused beverage by the name of Klaus. And so this beverage, the brand name is Klaus. This one is known as a Mezzero. And a Mezzero, Mez Mezzero was Louis Armstrong's weed dealer during the jazz era.
Yeah, Jewish guy.
Yeah, brought a lot of weed into Harlem and Chicago during the 30s.
And so they used to call weed mez, right? That used to be the term.
No, actually, a Mezzerol would have been a well-rolled cannabis cigarette.
Oh.
But mez, perhaps, but still, a Mezzerol was a well-rolled cannabis cigarette, not a joint or a reefer, but a mez.
Okay.
Or a Mezzerol.
Right, and that was based on Mez's name. Okay.
Right.
So back to the perfect bar. So you said, first of all, we removed the stigma.
So you remove the stigma, and then you're able to do beverages such as this because they're standalone beverages. They actually smell like cannabis. They actually taste like cannabis, and they have what's called live resin, which is a concentrate in them. So it's a wonderful experience that's fast acting and a lot of fun.
Now, if you want to do it yourself and you're not going to get something, there are, like yours, Klaus, that's coming out. There are some cocktails already pre-made for you. But if you want to do it from scratch, do you recommend that?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. From scratch is easy. I mean, I give you all the instructions about decarbing your cannabis, which means activating the THC from THCA through time and temperature. The technology, when I wrote the book in 2015, was pretty minimal. So I did everything the old-fashioned way. I used an oven and I used a double boiler. I stuffed a bunch of weed into bottles of liquor and, let it sit. And I also did things with double boilers where you activate the cannabis that's already been decarbed. It's all very scientific, but it's also a lot of fun and anyone can do it. I made the mistake of appearing on Viceland Live in New York City, and they asked me to make them a cannabis cocktail that they could feel, and I destroyed them on live TV.
You destroyed them with live resin and live TV.
Yeah, see it.
And what happened? What happened? I missed that episode. What happened?
It went really south because they got destroyed.
They just got so high on live TV.
They got so high, and they weren't like even pot smokers. They play this big Brooklyn game of, we can smoke anyone under the table because we're from Brooklyn. Hey, that's okay. But my drink destroyed them.
So what were they, did they get scared?
It was just a bad thing.
Yeah, it wasn't good. Okay.
It wasn't good.
Is it something we'll have to find that video, or unless they've buried it in Viceland. All right. So you wrote the book in 2015, so the technology has gotten a little bit more sophisticated. I mean, are there props and things that you can do?
Sure. I mean, I use the Levo, which is this beautiful little attachment, device right here.
It's called the Levo. How do you spell it?
Yeah. Levo.
Levo. Okay.
I also like using the magical butter machine from time to
Yep.
time. I find that tends to pulverize the cannabis. This is a little more gentle. It's a gentle infusion. The magical butter machine doesn't decarb. This one does. For decarbing alone, I use the Ardent FX or the Ardent Nova, which is a little smaller. When I used to live in an apartment, it was especially effective because when you're decarbing, it makes everything stink. So, you probably don't want to have that happen. The Ardent is, all self-contained.
For those who might not want to do that kind of work, is it going to be as simple, do you think, one day as, me picking up like a bitter, like getting a bottle of bitters, and this is a bottle of cannabis?
Oh, absolutely. Well, there are cannabis-infused bitters now. I'm not quite sure where they are. I think they're up in Washington State. I think the ones in California are off the market because there's too much alcohol in them. But that's another story for another day. Anything that could go wrong with starting a cannabis beverage company has for me. So I should write a book on how not to start a cannabis beverage company.
What did you give me an example of something that you screwed up?
I wanted to use cocktail bitters in the recipe. I had developed my recipe with cocktail bitters in mind. After going back and forth with a company known as Fee Brothers, they said that they could get me their cocktail bitters, but they couldn't supply it in jerry cans, which are metal containers. They could only send it to be in 4.5 ounce glass containers. So I was 6 months trying to figure that information out because I didn't know what it meant, only to find out at the very end, after we had formulated, that the state of California does not allow any alcohol of any kind in a craft mocktail that has THC in it. It just can't be.
Yeah.
There can't be any alcohol. I mean, it's such a minuscule amount, but
they don't.
There are no bitters in my drink, and I wanted bitters in there.
Yeah. For those who might not be that familiar with the experience of having a cannabis mocktail, a cannatail, I don't know what they're called. What should they know? Like, if we don't want to have a Viceland experience, because then that would be a bad experience for people and they'll never want to do it again. So is the same sort of rule that holds true with sort of edibles and, go low, start slow?
Less is more. Start slow and assume that just because you don't feel something in 10 minutes, you are going to feel something in 15 minutes.
Right.
My drinks hit pretty quickly. So there's no surprise there. The surprise is that if you follow my book directions implicitly, you'll be too high because many of the recipes start at 250 milligrams and go up. They're really meant for legacy users, not for your, independently wealthy young person who suddenly has a bunch of weed and some, craft spirits from his dad's liquor cabinet, and he's going to make something and get really destroyed. That's not what I'm talking about here. I think what I'm trying to teach is that the book was not written for recreational purposes. It was written for medicinal purposes. My publisher would not even entertain writing a book for recreational purposes. So you have to assume that each portion in the book is almost like going to your preparatory pharmacist and having them make you a big, a pint of medicinal mouthwash, say. And you wouldn't drink the entire thing in one go. You would drink it in portions. And that's how these drinks are designed.
Does it kick in about as quickly as alcohol, or does it take a little bit longer to kind of?
No, it actually takes shorter.
Really?
Because the cannabis is active and it is a live resin. For me, it hits in about 7 to 9 minutes.
Interesting. Okay. And then you just have that experience. Because I think a lot of people, what they have, and my concern too, when I drink cannabis-infused drinks, is that I have experience with drinking booze most of my life, right? So I kind of can sort of measure how quickly that's going to kick in. But sometimes with cannabis, it can take a little longer, so you don't really know what's going, and all of a sudden it hits you like a ton of bricks, and you're like, oh my God, I drank way too much of that cannabis. I'm way too high right now.
Yeah, that happens, but as I say, less is more. And there are two words that I used to stress when I worked in the liquor business. And one of them is called common, and the other one is called sense. And when they're put together, they mean common sense. And you should never lose the fact or lose control of the fact that common sense is what should guide us in all of our vices.
Yeah.
No one's telling you that you can't have vices, but we're just saying use common sense in keeping that stuff well at bay, because it's not going to help the cause of those of us who are struggling with stigmas to show someone outside of the cannabis business that you can't handle your weed.
Yeah.
And that's just too bad.
Yeah. Do you see a time in the very near future, and again, you're coming out with Klaus, so that's sort of an answer to my question, where it will be, you'll be able to do a cannabis cocktail book more on the recreational side, with lots of disclaimers and things saying, start with this, start low? Or is that, the kind of like the cocktail renaissance has been with us now for like the last 10 years, where people are just obsessed with cocktails, right? And people are charging, $25 for a cocktail. I just went to a restaurant in New York, in Los Angeles, that was like a $25 cocktail, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, I want to know who that bartender is, so I'm going to call him out.
Yeah.
Maybe not on Instagram or on Twitter, but I'm going to go visit them and say, what's in there?
Yeah, what could possibly be in there, right?
Because your food costs can't be that high.
No, I don't.
Your ingredients costs can't be that high.
I know.
And you're just and I just wrote an article today for Skunk Magazine, and I was talking about less than savory bartenders or mixologists say adding drops for like 4 or 5 drops of CBD into a craft mocktail or cocktail and upcharging $10 for CBD that, it's from an unsavory provenance, probably from the gas station down the corner, and you're charging your guests $10 extra
right.
to put 4 drops of this snake oil in your cocktail and babbling on for hours about what CBD does for you, when everyone knows that when you add CBD to alcohol, it negates it.
Oh, is that true?
Yeah, it does nothing.
It does nothing.
You need a bundle of CBD for it to do anything. Like 500 milligrams.
So the best use of CBD is to mix it with something that is not alcohol.
Exactly.
In closing here, so do you see a time though when people can just go into a restaurant and order a cannabis cocktail and
No, I don't.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why, because every place that alcohol is served is not the place that cannabis is served.
And do you think that's a good thing? Or I know that's the law of the land.
It's a good thing. I think it's a good thing.
And why is that?
In hindsight, because people can't handle their booze. They definitely can't handle their booze and their weed at the same time. They just can't do it. The liability is way too high. In New Jersey, we have something here called dram shop laws. I can't even imagine having everything I've worked hard for to be taken away because someone was killed in an automobile accident where weed and cannabis was in play.
Well, how about a bar that only serves cannabis cocktails?
I think the law firms are going to have their hands full.
Yeah. Okay. So it's going to be something that we do at home.
I hope that they do at home because it's fun and you can destroy your entire neighborhood.
You've been very good at that, clearly.
I'm good at that. I did that with liquor, when I was working in the rum business. I would go to like the Miami Rum Fest and have to make drinks for several hundred people. And I can't tell you that they had one each. They had many each.
All right. We are, this has been really interesting. If people want to find out more about you, about Klaus, where should they go?
Cocktailwhisperer.com is fun. My Klaus website is still up and running and down and up. That's drink, DRINK, KLAUS, drinkklaus.com. I have an Instagram page, which is my name, Warren Bobrow. I have a Twitter site that someone stole my name, so it's Warren Bobrow 1. I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. Everything free. I've never paid for play, and everything that I've accomplished to date has been done without PR. So
that's terrific.
If you see mistakes, it's something I've done.
Well, yeah, I like that you own it. And when can we expect Klaus to be in the California market?
I don't know. Do you know something I don't?
I'm hoping soon. I don't know. I have a few friends that are in that space.
It's so hard.
Yeah.
It's so hard. I as I said, I would love to write the book that says how not to start a cannabis beverage company, because I can tell you all the things. I would like to believe that the product will be out by summer.
Okay.
Well, I'm looking
hoping
for it.
it's
I'm
without
in California, so I am the market. So I am looking for it. Although it sounds like it might be pretty strong, so I'll have to take some sips of that real slow.
Well, each can is 10 milligrams.
Okay.
So if you split it in half, it's 5 and 5.
Okay.
So.
Terrific. Well, Warren, thank you so much for your time.
Enhance Your Life is brought to you by Wana,
The #1 infused product in North America.
Wana's entire process is designed to deliver the same great experience time after time. They have spent years fine-tuning their recipes so that their products are delicious, consistent, and potent. For more information, check out wanawellness.com. That's Wana, W-A-N-A, wellness.com.